A big hello and a very warm welcome to our lovely audience joining us from various different time zones across different geographies here today. Namaskar, salam alaikum, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. I'm your host, Nalin Chandna, and I welcome you all to the 84th episode of TLR Shows. TLR Shows is a flagship series of live stream shows brought to you by TLRNOW. TLRNOW is a niche, one-stop learning and development, coaching, training, and mentoring organization catering to corporates, educational institutions, and not-for-profits. TLRNOW is headquartered in Pune, India, and has presence across the subcontinent, Middle East, and the United States of America. On TLR shows, we have had guests from various different backgrounds in the last 15 months that we have been organizing these shows now. We have had entrepreneurs, coaches, trainers, speakers, relationship experts, doctors, fitness experts, people from the art and culture streams, theater, musicians, media houses, business houses, educationists, lawyers, etc. TLR Shows is one place where you meet amazing people who share their expertise, enabling us transform and upgrade our lives, ensuring a brighter future for all. Today, we have a very special guest on our show, Mr. Amit Raheja. Amit is the general manager, managing director, and a member of the board of directors of Johnson & Johnson Hong Kong Limited since 2019. Prior to this, he was in Tokyo, Japan for 3 years, where he led the turnaround and subsequent divestiture of the diabetes care company's business unit. Over the past 17 years, he has served in various leadership roles in the healthcare industry in India, Asia Pacific, Japan, and now in Hong Kong. He is a proud sponsor of the Hong Kong Community Impact Team at Johnson & Johnson. Amit is also the chair of the Healthcare Committee at American Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong. He has lived and worked in 8 different cities across the world and strongly believes in the power of agility. He strongly believes that the healthcare industry can and must play a bigger role in improving the lives of patients around the world through continuous innovation and scientific education. He completed his MBA from the Indian School of Business and has graduated from the value-based healthcare program from the Harvard Business School. Prior to joining Johnson & Johnson, Amit was an entrepreneur for about 5 years. We are really glad to have you here on our show today, and our audience joining us across various social media channels is really looking forward to gain some really useful insights on this very important topic that we have today, digital readiness of healthcare industry. A very warm welcome, Amit.
Nalin, listen, wish everybody a very good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Nalin, thank you for having me on the show. Truly my pleasure to come and chat with you, and really, I hope I can add some value to the audience that is there. But I have to tell you to begin, you and Udayan have done a fantastic job in putting together so many speakers. I heard from you over the past few days about your show. So big congratulations and wish you guys all the very best.
Thank you so much, Amit. Thank you so much. So, Amit, our audience would love to know about your journey from entrepreneurship to an accomplished professional leader with a renowned healthcare brand.
Thank you, Nalin. So I'll start from entrepreneurship, but I don't know about the accomplished leader, but I'll talk to you about where I am today. Um,
Sure.
I started as an entrepreneur just after university in Mumbai. I studied in college and I've done a commerce graduation. And during my graduation days, I was on an entrepreneurial journey. I come from a business family. It seemed to be the next logical step, and that's how I got into forming my own startup. And my startup was really in the multimedia space. And I ran that
Right.
for about 5 years. Uh, After which I went into a business school. I went to ISB really to do my MBA, and I was a campus recruit with Johnson and Johnson straight after ISB. Really, the motivation of
Right.
moving from entrepreneur to a professional was purely personal reasons. If I can be very honest and brutally candid with the audience here, it was really my then girlfriend and now my wife who wanted to make sure that I have a stable income, and so I had to move from entrepreneurship to a professional journey. That's how it started off.
Wonderful.
When I
Right.
joined BJ, I realized that this is the medical industry and this is the healthcare industry in which I have no experience. And really speaking, I joined the company thinking that I'm going to quit this within the next 6 to 12 months and find myself a job in the media industry. But
Right.
life has plans. It so happened that I've spent 17 years not only in healthcare but within the same organization. So, but going back
Mm.
in time, I'd changed nothing. I think the entrepreneurial journey has only strengthened my skills as a professional, and I think it's
Right.
great experience to have, and I look back on that with great nostalgia.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Great. So, Amit, Johnson and Johnson is a mammoth organization, and I believe pharma is just one aspect. They are extensively into a very wider healthcare segment, so to speak. So, tell us more about the organization and what made you stuck around for 17 years with the same organization. Then, when you had thought that you'll probably change jobs soon after, move to media, but you kind of stuck on, and you've been doing well. You've been working in various geographies. So, tell us more about the organization and how it binds together people.
Yeah. So Nalin, thank you. First of all, Johnson Johnson is the world's most diversified and largest broad-based healthcare company that exists. Johnson Johnson is in the business of pharmaceutical, in medical devices, uh, also in consumer. A lot of people, even a lot, when I joined Johnson and Johnson, I would associate Johnson and Johnson with only the consumer business, with the baby soap, the oil, the shampoos, and that's what we as
Right,
consumers look at J&J as. But that's a small part of the business and yet a very important part. The large part of the business really is pharmaceutical and medical devices. And
right,
therefore, it's largely a healthcare company. Um, the thing that really made me stick on to Johnson and Johnson is really the credo of Johnson and Johnson, and we call it our credo. But it's a very simple one-page document that has been in existence since more than 50 years, and this is the document that really guides the organization in the manner in which we do business, in the manner in which we take decisions, and in the culture that we set up within the organization. The very fact that it stood the test of time for over 5 decades just speaks of the strength of the document. And just in a couple
right.
of minutes, if I walk you through what the credo is,
Sure.
it's really 4 paragraphs. It really says our first responsibility is to customers, which is the doctors and the nurses, mothers and fathers that really use our products and avail of our
Right,
services. Our
right,
second responsibility is to employees and the business associates that work with us. And yet in doing so, we must make sure that they have fair opportunity. They must feel safe while working for Johnson and Johnson. And the third responsibility is really to the community in which we exist. So we must be good corporate citizens. We must pay our fair share of taxes. We must follow the law of the land everywhere we exist. And the fourth and the final paragraph, which I believe is the most interesting in the credo, and which is slightly different from many other organizations. The fourth paragraph says that our fourth responsibility is to stockholders and shareholders. And really, we believe at Johnson& and Johnson that if you follow the first three well, if your customers, employees, and the community is well taken care of, your stockholders would
right.
be automatically rewarded. And I think
Mm.
there's enough testament if you look at the J&J stock history over the past 5 or 6 decades. It's considered a dividend aristocrat. It's a AAA rated company, and there's only two AAA rated companies in the world. One is Microsoft, the other is Johnson and Johnson. And
Awesome.
really, this is because over the past 50 years, J&J has been increasing dividends every year, despite, think about it, all the changes that have happened in the world, all the disruptions that have happened. The internet
Mm.
revolution came about, but it's a consistently financially growing and a dividend delivering organization. But despite that not being our first, second, or third responsibility. So I think really the
Mm.
whole, I marvel at this thing that we call our credo, but really it's
Right.
marvelous in the way in which the organization is run, the decisions that are taken. So that's what really makes me and a lot of other employees stick on to J&J for a very long period of time.
Wonderful. Wonderful. No, that speak great about the organization. Really, really setting examples for other players in the industry. Actually, wonderful. So, Amit, you've been in leadership roles across geographies, and with the rich experience that you have, what do you consider are the personality traits that make a good leader?
Thank you, Nalin. Very difficult question. But first of all, I have to say that I think there's many kinds of leaders in the world. There's many diverse kinds of leaders, and all of them thrive and survive in various different situations. In my opinion, in my organization, given the current state of time that we are in, I believe two things are really important to really set apart good leaders from others. The first is really purpose. It's what purpose are you for, and what purpose do you really set out for the team and the organization that you are leading. And I've found that when the purpose is strong and the team and people believe in the purpose, uh, the team really tends to rally behind that. So then it's no longer just about financial incentives. It's no longer just about careers and money. Of course, all that is extremely important. I don't take away the
Right.
importance of all that. But the purpose of why you're working, why do you get up on a Monday morning and get to office? What really excites you to get up and walk into office? What part of the work do you really like? And I think at Johnson and
Right.
Johnson we're able to provide a good purpose where it's healthcare for all. So that's really the
Right.
mission we have in Johnson and Johnson. The second aspect that
Okay.
I believe that sets apart good leaders, especially in today's times, and we've all seen it with COVID, is really agility. You might call it flexibility or agility, but adapting your leadership style, adapting to new situations, being flexible in being nimble, quick, being able to accept mistakes, being able to make changes when they have to be made.
Right.
And
Right.
change often comes with resistance. Human beings will generally tend to resist any form of change, and that's human nature, and that's fair and fine. But with agility, what happens
Yeah.
is really you have to question yourself as a leader. Am I being an agent of change, or am I being the one that's stopping change from happening? So I think the more friendly you become with change, the more friendly you become with what's my purpose at large. I think these really set apart good leaders, in my opinion.
Right. Right. And I think, as they say, that change is difficult in the beginning, very messy in the middle, but outstanding at the end. So I think you have to go through that to reach that outstanding moment. You have to go through that change, which is always difficult to kind of start on, and it gets all the more difficult as you move along. You're
Absolutely.
right.
Well,
Uh, Yeah. So Amit, how would you describe your leadership style, and do you feel that you have evolved from a different leadership style to one that you are now, considering that the difficult times that we've just passed through?
yeah, Nalin, of course, I believe, I've evolved hugely in my own leadership style over the past more than a decade. And really, I would credit a lot of this to really the feedback of my team, feedback of my bosses, feedback of stakeholders that I work with throughout the past years. And I think this would be true for almost every professional and everybody in a leadership role. You never know how you're performing or how you're perceived unless you really get feedback. And I'd like to believe that my leadership style is really about providing an open environment where folks are able to give me feedback. Sometimes it's not positive, quite often it's not positive, but that's really
Right.
the beginning of change. And sometimes it's the most difficult thing to really accept negative feedback, because negative feedback can be given to you in large organizations in a systemic manner when you conduct a 360 feedback.
True.
What I used to do in the earlier days is when I used to receive feedback that is not aligned with what I think of myself, I would rubbish that feedback. But over time,
Hmm.
I have come to realize that it's as difficult as it may be, it may hit you in the gut, but it's important to first accept that. And I think that really is 90% of the battle won. Once you have accepted that, you can then evolve and change your leadership style.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just like most leaders have, I think I've gone through a journey of evolution, and that's really built upon, in the agility that I have to demonstrate in my role.
I think there's extreme power in reflection because you may just carry on with the hustle bustle on a daily basis, but if you just kind of take a step back and realize that, are you heading in the right direction? Are you controlling the people the way you should be controlling? Are you leading them the way you should be leading? Sometimes we don't realize that we are in the wrong, and most of the time it happens until you really do a conscious reflection exercise. I think that's very important. And
Yeah,
criticism has to be, I mean, we should always welcome constructive criticism. Obviously, there are people who would criticize you to bring you down, but there are many people who you have trust on. And if they criticize, I think there's no harm in taking that input. Nobody is perfect. We're all work in progress.
yeah. I mean, think about it, Nalin, today, especially in large organizations, okay? The organization structures have become so complex and so matrix that you're mostly working through levels of influence versus levels of reporting structures. And because of
Right.
that, you're forced to collaborate with so many stakeholders, not only in different functions, but also with different backgrounds, different cultures, different markets, different countries, different value systems sometimes. And as a leader, to bring together all the power of this collaboration, I think is really important, and
True.
there is a huge impact in that if that can happen.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree with you. At this juncture, I would also encourage our audience members to kind of keep sending their questions. We have Amit here, and it is always good to have such accomplished professionals on our show to kind of take your questions on management, on leadership, on the healthcare sector. So please send in your questions. I'm here, and I'll take it up with him. So, Amit, there is a line of difference between management and leadership. What would your advice be to the current managers to become successful leaders of future?
So once again, Nalin, thank you for the question. Once again, I qualify this. I don't think I'm anybody to give advice, but I'll tell you what my opinion is. And I've
Sure.
evolved over the years in my style, either as a manager or as a leader. And I think the one real difference that I have noticed in myself as well as in others is really courage. And when I say courage, for example, I'll give you a personal example. Okay, a few years back or many years back, when I would make a decision about what I have to do regarding the business or the team or the customers, if there's an investment to be made, or if there's any other decision to be made, I would always refer it to my boss, or I would want someone's approval on it, or I would want to make sure that I'm in the right direction. So I would want my
Mm,
stakeholders to be aligned. I would want approval so that if something goes wrong, I don't get blamed for it. So I was operating from a space of fear. I would make decisions, but I don't want to go wrong in that. So that was my primary motivation while going about making those decisions and even making those changes. But over
mm,
time, I have come to realize that when you operate from the goal of purpose, I think it completely changes your mindset. And mindset, why? Because then you get some form of independence in your mind, where I feel that I don't need to take an approval from my boss. I have the credo as a guiding principle for my organization, and different people have different guiding principles for their organizations and wherever they're working. And if I operate
right.
according to those principles, I will take feedback from various stakeholders, but I feel comfortable in making a decision. Because if that
Mm,
decision is scrutinized and audited at a later point of time, I can stand up and I feel confident to stand up whether I have to face my family, whether it comes in the front page of a headline, whether auditors ask me. If I feel comfortable answering those questions, I would go ahead and make the decision. And I think
mm,
one way this is really impacted, or one benefit that has come out of this style, is really empowering the team to make decisions and empowering to make decisions in the right manner. So it's okay to fail. It's okay if the outcomes are not as expected. It's okay if
true.
there's financial impacts to it, but then there's a learning associated with that as well. So as long as you learn, if you don't succeed, and if you succeed, great. But in both
Correct.
directions, I think the one thing really sets apart managers and leaders, in my opinion, at least in my personal observation, has been really courage, the ability to operate
Correct.
with purpose instead of operating with fear.
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's very important. Being courageous, maybe setting the vision and grounded to your values. I think that really makes leaders work. And in fact, in a lot of my programs, one example that I give in my leadership programs is about Johnson and Johnson with respect to the Tylenol case that they had in early 80s. which is a landmark thing. And the even though there was certain samples of Tylenol that was kind of laced with cyanide in Chicago area, I think, but they had withdrawn the entire sample from the market. So setting that kind of examples, whether it is an organization or whether the leaders, because leaders are what, and organizations are what, it's all about humans. So driven by humans. So leadership has to take the right kind of decisions to set the right examples for the society.
Nalin, even with that
Absolutely.
example, with Tylenol,
Yeah.
what happened was, for the audience that does not know, is Tylenol was supposed to have been the reason why a couple of people died. We don't know whether it's absolutely true or not, but the CEO of J&J at that point of time took a very courageous decision. As his decision was,
Correct.
we are not sure if Tylenol caused the death or not, but there could be a likelihood, and in that case, we're going to withdraw all the Tylenols that exist across the shelves. So there was a massive
Yeah. Yeah.
recall, which cost the company hundreds of millions of dollars, not only in business revenue.
Absolutely.
Imagine the bad reputation
Reputation.
impact, the
Yeah.
reputation, the
Yeah.
trust of
Yeah.
customers.
Correct. Correct.
It was a
Correct.
very bold decision. It
Yeah.
was a courageous decision at that point of time. You don't know how your stakeholders are going to respond and react. Is he going to lose his job as a CEO? But despite all the risks, he took the decision, which was the correct
Correct.
decision, with our first responsibility being to customers.
Correct.
And if you go back in
Correct.
hindsight,
Correct.
the stockholders actually rewarded Johnson and Johnson, where the stock actually went
Right.
up
Right.
12 months of that decision being taken.
Yeah.
So
Correct.
I
Correct.
think this just goes on to say that this is a story about when you take courageous and correct decisions, you will eventually be responded. And like you said, any change or any tough decision in the beginning can be tough, but eventually you would be rewarded.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think with Tylenol, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Johnson had about 20% market share, which kind of fell to like 7-8% within weeks, 2-3 weeks when this happened. But taking this reactive measures that were taken, I think in about a year's time, you came back to about 18-20% still. So I think it was a wonderful example of ethics, right leadership, and sticking to your values. I think that's important. Wonderful. So, in your journey in the healthcare sector, Amit, how have you seen the sector evolve over the years? If we talk about the healthcare sector, because you've been all along been in the healthcare industry for 17 years.
Yeah, great question, Nalin. So, the healthcare sector, first of all, is just to set context, first of all, the healthcare sector is quite complex and it has a lot of stakeholders. Really, the healthcare sector exists because there is a patient which is right in the center of all the stakeholders. And that's the reason why there is healthcare, there's doctors, there's companies, there's regulators, there's all sorts of stakeholders. But really, it's the patient in the center. And all the stakeholders are trying to make sure that the patient lives a better life, lives a longer life, and lives a better quality of life. Uh, Over the years, what has happened is, and I think all these changes, I think, are in the right direction. A few changes have happened. The first is the healthcare sector has become more complex because each stakeholder now has a stronger voice, and I think that's a change in the right direction because you do want to hear what insurance companies have to say, what payers of healthcare have to say. In some
Right.
places, private insurance companies, in some places, it's governments or government bodies that actually pay for healthcare. You do want to hear
Right.
what doctors and nurses and physicians and surgeons have to say. You do
Mm-hmm.
want to hear what industry such as ours, which is really here to serve and provide new technology and provide the best technology available so that doctors and nurses can do their job. And finally, it's also the patients. Patients over the years have really evolved because of the internet, where you see much more information coming in the hands of patients. So they're much more
Right.
aware of this one of them. They're asking more questions, which is a great thing. They're demanding more services. They're demanding more instant services from not only doctors and nurses, but also payers, from medical technology companies, from pharmaceutical companies. And I think it's all this is a step in the right direction. So the one change that has happened is it's you hear much more voices of the stakeholders. The second change that has happened is really the advent of technology. Healthcare sector,
Right.
I believe, has not been an early adopter in technology. And once again, I would
Mm.
think that's a good thing because healthcare deals with lives of people. Healthcare deals with
Yeah,
patients that
that's true.
are sick. You don't want to be a front runner and try something new before it's been proven and before there's studies to show that it's safe and effective. So rightfully so, healthcare industry has not been an early adopter of technology compared to other industries like the financial industry, the banking industry,
True.
the retail industry, etc., so on and so forth. But I think over time you have seen much more of technology come into healthcare. So I think that's really been the second change. The third change is really, I think, the power of information coming forth to the patients as well as the doctors and nurses. And I think they're really using this information extremely well. If you look at how information is being used 20 years back or 40 years back versus now, it's being used much more intelligently by all the stakeholders within the healthcare industry. So I think that's really the third and one of the big changes that's happened or the way it's evolved the
Right.
healthcare.
Right. Right. I think digitalization, if we speak, is probably a wider compass. I mean, medical equipments, for example, have always been very sophisticated equipments, any which ways. But I think digitalization, so to speak, in terms of AI and all, which you're saying is now going to kind of come in more, is what you mean by saying that?
Of course, I think there's going to be much more. So I believe my personal opinion is over the next 10 years, the healthcare that
Mm,
we see today, you would see
mm,
dramatic transformations in the way healthcare is delivered to patients. Let's say in 2030, 9 or 10 years from now, there will be technology will play a much bigger role, whether it's AI, whether it's big data, whether it's just microchips, whether it's nanotechnology, devices are becoming smaller, more intelligent, devices are becoming
right.
faster.
Right.
There's more personalization of medicines that's coming in. So
Right.
all this is possible largely due to information technology, largely due to big data, largely due to more evolved forms of clinical studies that are happening around the world. Even medical technology, if you look at, I'll give you an example, okay? I used to
Mm,
work in a business which was a diabetes business, and most of us would be aware of somebody or the other, either our friends or family or social circle, someone who has diabetes. But in the
yeah.
earlier
Yeah.
days, even now, it's quite prevalent where you take blood glucose monitors to check your to check your blood sugar levels, if I may
Blood
call
sugar
it,
levels. Yeah. Yeah.
right? And now technology has evolved where you have a small patch that you can put on your arm, and it just stays there for 2 weeks. Now there's new technology that has come that stays there for like 3 months. It's slowly going to evolve into 6 months and 1 year, and you don't have to change that. The only way to check your blood sugar level is really scan your mobile phone, and you get a reading at any given point of time. You also get
I
charts
see.
of your blood sugar levels every 15 minutes for the past 2 weeks, for the past
Right.
one. And I think this level of information really is important in decision making between a physician and a patient into the quality of life of a patient. What should they eat? How much should they exercise? Are they sleeping well? Are the drugs and pills that a patient is taking, are they working? Are they effective for that patient or not? Um,
Right.
Really, it's transforming the care, the quality of care that patients receive. And I think over time, this will become even more and more.
Hmm. Hmm. Right, right. You're right. I think, but you see, if you see, the recent year and a half has been a redefining period for sectors all over. But more so, if you look at the pharma and the healthcare sector in particular, and you're right that digitalization is going to come, new technologies are coming. But what kind of challenges that you see with respect to adaptability to digitalization? I think that those would also be quite a lot.
Yeah, of course, Nalin. So I think there's both. Okay, there's a huge amount of opportunity, and along with that, there's also a huge amount of challenge. Um, it's literally like we have a whiteboard or white space in front of us, and it's up to the healthcare sectors or various stakeholders within the healthcare sector to really collaborate and write the future for us. So
Right.
while technology does play a larger role, it also has to be balanced out with other factors which are important. such as privacy of patient,
Right.
such as
Absolutely.
where the data sit. Governments are quite sensitive to where patient data is going to sit. As an example, if electronic medical records could be made accessible on a cloud, it helps patients because if they go from one hospital to another hospital or one doctor to another doctor, they don't have to explain the background. The second doctor, the second hospital just knows immediately what's happening with the patient. They know the
Hmm.
history of the patient. They know everything that has happened. But that
Right.
has to be balanced out with patient privacy. That has to be balanced out with sensitive information going out. So again, I don't know what the right answer is, but I think there's various discussions going on. We constantly engage in dialogues with various stakeholders, the governments, the physicians, with patient groups to really understand how should the future look like. And while we don't have an answer at
Right.
this point of time, the good news is that all the stakeholders are aware that the future is going to look quite different from what it looks today. So it's really the collective and
Absolutely.
collaborative responsibility of all these
Hmm.
stakeholders that are involved.
Yeah, I think you're right. Data privacy could be probably the single biggest challenge for the industry. You might have all the resources to implement things that people want, but data privacy, because every person is different, and these kind of issues become so controversial. We've seen in the past with various organizations with respect to data privacy laws. Yeah, you're right. So,
Yeah.
Amit, how do you see the employment landscape with respect to the sector, and what would be your advice to young men and women aspiring to make a career in the healthcare sector? And I'm referring especially to newer entrants who are looking at companies like Johnson and Johnson and the likes to enter into the profession now.
Yeah. So Nalin, thank you. And first of all, anybody who's watching the show, I strongly encourage that the healthcare sector is extremely exciting. Sometimes it does not seem to be very exciting because we don't read about it as in glossy newspapers or magazines. For people outside of the healthcare industry, it may sound like, or it may look like an industry that is quite staid and old. And they're probably right in their opinion because like we said, we're not early adopters of technology, uh, stuff like that. But one thing's for sure that with all the changes that are happening within the healthcare sector, the next 10 to 20 years are going to look quite different for the healthcare sector. And
Hmm.
if you come from any background, whether you come in from a software background, an electronic background, a technology background, a finance background, I think there's a role to play within the healthcare sector. Especially now, where organizations are waking up to the fact that we don't want to just hire biomedical engineers and B Farm graduates and science graduates. We realize the value of diversity, and I think at Johnson and Johnson, we constantly and consciously look for diverse candidates. So we want to get people within the commercial organization, within enabling functions, really from diverse and different backgrounds, because we realize that as the future is different, it's different people with different backgrounds that will help us get a different perspective. And these perspectives are important as we're in an era or environment of innovation. So you really don't want to do the same things that you've done over the past 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And really a
Right.
diverse is the most capable to deliver on innovation.
Hmm. Right. So, are there any specific skills that they need to hone in to improve their employability and success in the sector?
So one of the things that I'd say is read up a little bit about the healthcare sector. So even when you say healthcare sector, like I said, there's so many stakeholders. There's hospital groups, there's physician groups, but I talk a little bit more about organizations such as ours, which is the pharmaceutical industry, or the medical device industry, or medical technology players. If you're interested in joining these organizations, I'd strongly suggest read up a little bit about the healthcare industry. Read up a little bit. You should know a little bit about what stage is the healthcare industry at, what stage is the company that you're interested in joining at, what's the future looking like for the company that you want to join or whether you're applying. What challenges are they facing at this point of time? For instance, I'll give you an example. Many of the med tech companies are in a phase of transformation where we all want to transform from the current state to the future state. And the journey from the current state to the future state is all about technology and digitalization. And while this happens, we recognize that we will have to be very agile and flexible as organizations. So the reason we have to be flexible and agile as organizations is because we don't know exactly how the future looks like. But if you join
Right.
this journey at this stage, you're going to be part of a team that is carving out the future for the patients. And while there's several stakeholders involved, it's also the organizations also get involved in collaborating with various stakeholders. So while we're not decision makers, but we need to collaborate with government, with regulatory bodies, with insurance companies or government that pays for healthcare, with physician groups, with surgeon groups, with hospital groups, with patient advocacy groups. So you really need to get a sense of what multiple stakeholders have to say about the future. And it has to be balanced out with the interest of the patient, as well as what laws of the land require, as well as sensitive aspects like patient privacy, where do data clouds sit. So while technology is important, those other aspects also are equally important.
Mm, right. Absolutely. So, Amit, if we look at the geographical landscape of the healthcare sector, I mean, there's so much of diversity. If we look at the challenges that the Western world faces versus the developing nations face or the third world countries are facing. So, what do you see the way forward, and how do you see the lesser privileged nations or sectors, nations, for example, how do they kind of catch up with the challenges, especially in the last 1.5 year, so much of challenge that the world over has seen. So how do you see what challenges they have and how would they kind of come up to speed?
Yeah, Nalin, thank you. And I think phenomenal question. And really, the whole scenario of healthcare, the state of healthcare in various markets and various countries has been highlighted specifically over the past 18 months, where because of COVID, we've really seen healthcare come up close and personal to all of us around the world, where we witnessed healthcare
Absolutely.
at a very personal level with our family or friends or someone who we know. And
Yep.
the silver lining amongst all this is, at least I think if you look at most stakeholders around the world, whether it's a developed country or a developing market, everyone has woken up to the fact that healthcare is really important. Not only because of COVID, but really you want your population, you want your citizens to be healthy and safe at all points of time. Um, of course, the reaction to COVID and the reaction to the pandemic, even in future, the reaction has been different with different markets and with different countries. It's sometimes an oversimplification when we say the developed markets or the developed countries have have a similar form of healthcare. Even within the
Right.
developed world, there is quite a bit of diversity in the quality of healthcare and the manner in which governments and healthcare systems have responded to the pandemic. Even within the
Right.
developing and economies, there's a lot of diversity in the manner in which governments and healthcare systems have responded to the pandemic. So
Mm.
it could be an oversimplification of developed and developing, but there's a few things that have emerged as really important for developed as well as emerging knowledge. The first thing is really how much are we investing in healthcare? And when I say
Mm.
investing, it's not just a dollar value or a percentage of GDP, but how much attention and resource do we really provide to future doctors, future nurses? They're really the backbone of the healthcare industry. We've all come to realize the importance of doctors and nurses, where they've really become the true soldiers in this war that the whole world is fighting. So
Absolutely. Yep. Yep.
not only how many doctors and how many nurses are we creating for the future, but what's the quality of education that they're receiving? When they graduate from medicine, from medical schools, are they really ready, or do they need to become more ready? Are they ready with the right skill sets? And I don't think
Mm.
I'm qualified to answer this question, but I think governments and doctors really are already thinking about these questions.
Yeah.
And I think to
And I
your
think it's
question,
also, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
no,
Go
to
ahead,
your
Amit.
question, developed and developing world. Of course, the big difference has been the amount of dollars that some countries can invest in healthcare as an immediate reaction. some other countries or some other economies have not been able to put in that many dollars, whether it's in fighting the pandemic, whether it's in just vaccination programs. But I think the good part is the world is coming together where I see WHO, I see several countries helping other countries in order to get vaccinated. Eventually, we all realize that the fight is not over, the war is not over till the entire world has gone through this successfully.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think country leadership also, to a large extent, it depends on what kind of priorities they set in terms of the R&D spends, in terms of promoting setting up of medical colleges, enhancing the quality of education. I think that is also going to play a big role in terms of the future of especially the countries which are kind of lesser privileged at the moment, I believe.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Uh, So, Amit, you touched repeatedly with respect to the stakeholders of the healthcare sector, and I believe, unlike any other industry which has got more commercial partners, the healthcare sector has got very diverse kind of stakeholders. Not only your shareholders, employees, customers, suppliers, but I think governments, regulatory agencies, licensing authorities, and organizations as huge as WHO, because they also come into direct contact uh, with organizations in the healthcare sector. So, coming back to digitalization and putting things into context, how do you see that portion improving? Because not all governments, not all regulatory agencies are digital friendly. And you work in diverse geographies. Some countries, like for example, Singapore or US or Hong Kong, where you are based now, are more open to such kind of interaction. But how do you see digital challenges with respect to such stakeholders? And how do you deliver enhanced value to these stakeholders with digitalization?
Yeah. Nalin, once again, fantastic question. And I'll tell you this, that, as we speak, we're in a stage of evolution as far as digitalization is concerned with various stakeholders. This is not just healthcare organizations such as ours, but it's also hospitals, it's also regulatory bodies, it's also governments. And I think all the stakeholders are equally aware of the advantages of digitalization and all are making significant progress. I'll give you an example. One example is there's smart hospitals coming up. Okay, and when you say smart hospitals, it's mostly smart digital hospitals. And the difference
Right.
between a smart digital hospital and these are the hospitals of the future. There's already one such hospital that's already launched in Hong Kong. And when you go to that
Okay.
hospital, as a patient, you will realize that right from the time that there is a triage system means you walk in with, let's say, a stomach ache or a tummy ache, and you don't know what's wrong with you. The triage system will really tell you whether you have to go for ambulatory care, emergency care, or you go see a regular consultant. Right from
Okay.
that point in time, all your records are stored at a cloud within the hospital. uh, they're aware of who you are as a patient. The doctor that you go to visit is aware of who you are. They're aware of your background and medical records if you have visited that hospital before. And this is all done in a paperless manner. All the treatment that is provided to you, right from the consultation to treatment to your progress as far as the treatment journey is concerned, is all saved up on a cloud. So that if you have a
Right.
continued problem, or if you come back after a year or 2 years, they're able to trace back to how you're responding as a patient. And I think the reason I tell you
Okay.
this example is because if you scale this example up, it just tells you the power of technology and electronic medical records. Even when you
Mm-hmm.
for regulatory licenses or regulatory approvals, there is a lot of power in digitalization. I'll give you a hypothetical example. A hypothetical example is, let's say we apply for license of a drug or a medical technology equipment in Japan, and all the documents and all the evidence that we have provided for that license, if it's up on a cloud that can be accessed by any country worldwide, and then you go and apply for the same drug or the same medical technology in Hong Kong, and then in India, and then in the US. And all of that sits up on a cloud. The whole world gets access in a very transparent manner of what kind of documents exist, what is the evidence of safety and efficacy of these pharmaceutical drugs or medical technology equipment. So while on the
Right.
one hand, I think there's a lot of power in digitalization and there's a lot of benefit that it can give us. On the other hand, it has to be balanced out with how governments work with each other, with how confidentiality works as far as submitting these documents are concerned and patient privacy is concerned. Different governments in different countries have different perspectives as far as this is concerned. So the
Right.
reason I say this is you're in a stage in the world where we're aware of the benefits of technology. We're also aware that there are other significant human challenges in order to take this forward. And I believe that human beings are smart enough to figure out at some point of time we will come to a midpoint or a balance equilibrium where we will make progress on both fronts.
True. True. True.
So regulators are waking up to the fact that digitalization is extremely important. Even past records are now being digitalized at different speeds and different pace in different markets. But generally, if I speak world over, everybody is making significant and fast progress, especially with the advent of COVID.
Right. Right. I think even before you came into Hong Kong in 2019, that was pre-COVID. While you were in Japan, I think you would have seen that because Japan is supposed to be a progressive, technologically advanced country. So you would have seen a lot of digitalization with respect to government interaction there as well, I believe.
Yeah, Japan is, of course, it's, Japan as an example, while the whole world thinks of Japan as extremely front runner in technology, while they are, and they're very technologically advanced as a society, as a nation, not only in healthcare, but even outside of healthcare. On the other hand, they're also extremely careful and extremely sensitive to what technology is used, specifically in the healthcare
Right.
industry. And I think that's a
Right.
perfect marriage or a perfect example of how you can be careful while still adopting new technology. And Japan is one of
Mm-hmm.
the places which has one of the highest densities of medical robots or surgical robots. So, and
Okay.
that's really the future where you see surgery, you see robotic and digital equipment playing a much larger role within the operating room between the surgeon and the patient. So and all these robotic and digital equipments are really to assist the surgeon. So it's eventually the surgeon
Mm.
performing surgery, but just like the surgeon has several tools available today, they also have medical robots, surgical robots, or surgeon assisted robots available as an additional tool. And these are really
Okay.
transformational in outcomes of patients as far as precision is concerned, as far as more safety is concerned, whether with respect to infection, whether it's with respect to accidents happening. And while that happens with every new technology, Nalin, what happens is there is also a learning curve because even when I got the iPhone first, it took me a few days to figure out how the iPhone works, as
True.
intuitive as it is. So, in
Absolutely.
a
Yeah.
very similar manner, even with surgical robots or medical robots, there is a learning curve that a surgeon and the healthcare industry undergoes. And I think it's iterative
Mm.
feedback where the surgeon gives companies like ours feedback, and it's cyclical. And over time, we come up to something that we agree is acceptable to move forward. And I think now surgical robots have been around since almost a decade now, and I think now it's ready to disrupt the surgical world in a lot of ways.
Right. Right. You're right. Right. Amit, you are a really busy professional, but what keeps you busy when you are not at work? That's a slightly off the track question.
Yeah, no, no, no. First of all, I'd say that I always try and maintain a good work-life balance, and I strongly encourage my team and business associates to do that as well. Especially, nowadays where we realize the importance of mental health. One of the ways really to do it is maintaining a good work-life balance. So, a few things that are important for me. One is spending time with my family and friends. That's important to me. The other thing that's really important to me is playing sports. I'm an avid sports person. I play a lot of badminton. At this point of time,
And you broke your leg, right?
I broke my leg a month back. So unfortunately, I'm recovering from that. I went through a sprain and I
Right.
cannot play right now. But I'm going through regular physiotherapy and hopefully I should be able to play in a month or so. So
Wonderful.
But that's, being a sports
Uh,
person really is a part of life, I guess.
right. I know we wish you a very speedy recovery so that you're back to your game. Amit,
You
what
know,
is a final piece of advice to young managers and aspiring leaders before we kind of end this session today?
listen, Nalin, first of all, thank you very much. And like I said before, I don't think I'm anyone to give advice, but just a friendly note to, anybody who's a young professional, young managers, young leaders, is a few things. One is really be flexible and agile, because the future is for sure going to be very different from the world that we've seen till today. So the more flexible you are, the more agile you are in your mindset, in your goals. You may still have a goal, but the way to get there might become very different over the next 10 years than you might envisage.
Right.
So be friendly with change, be friendly with agility, and I think you'd be fine. And really, the second thing is take care of yourself and enjoy the journey. It's really not about the destination, but if you're not enjoying the journey, if you're not enjoying getting up and getting to work, uh, it's unlikely that you'll be successful. The more you enjoy it, there's a very high probability that you'll be successful in whatever field you are in.
Right. That's wonderful advice. Amit, I absolutely loved the session today, and I really hope that our audience got some wonderful insights as well. I sincerely thank Mr. Amit Raheja for finding out time for us and being a part of today's episode of TLR shows and sharing such important insights. Thank you, audience, for joining us from various different geographies. It is really heartening to note the increase in the list of countries from where our participants have been joining now. Keep showing this love. We express our deepest gratitude to you all. Keep following us across our social media channels to stay updated with our upcoming shows and with what new is happening at TLR Now. Thank you so much. You all have a great day. Take care, stay safe, eat well, and be happy. Thanks so much. Goodbye. Namaskar. Alvida. Masalama. Thank you again, Amit. I will see you at the broadcast studio on the other side of the show. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody. Bye bye and stay safe.